As soon as Marcus found out his grandfather was leaving him an inheritance, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Pack your things, Victoria. I'm a wealthy man now. I don't need a housekeeper playing at being my wife." He had me escorted from the estate and filed for divorce within days. I signed everything without a word, but the moment the attorney read the will aloud, Marcus dropped to his knees right there in front of me. Welcome to the Twists of Destiny channel. Before we begin, drop a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to know. We hope you enjoy listening to this captivating story. Victoria woke to the sound of her alarm at 4:45 a.m. The sky outside was still pitch black, only the security lights casting a dim glow over the manicured gardens of the Hartwell estate. She stretched carefully, trying not to disturb Marcus, and slipped out from under the Egyptian cotton sheets. The cold immediately bit at her bare feet despite the heated floors. Even in the staff wing, which had been converted into their private quarters after the wedding, luxury surrounded her. But luxury didn't mean warmth. Not anymore. In the bathroom, Victoria studied her reflection in the ornate mirror. 35 years old, but the woman staring back looked closer to 45. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. No amount of the expensive concealer Marcus bought her could hide them now. Fine lines had etched themselves around her mouth. Her hair, once glossy and well-maintained, desperately needed attention. The roots were showing, the ends split. But between managing the entire household staff, overseeing every detail of the estate, and trying to be the wife Marcus wanted, there was never time for the salon. She splashed ice-cold water on her face and began her routine. "You're up at this ungodly hour again?" Marcus's irritated voice drifted from the bedroom. "The caterers are coming at 7 for the garden party setup, Marcus," Victoria answered softly, pulling on her work clothes, a simple black dress, sensible shoes. "I need to oversee everything before the guests arrive." "For God's sake, we have staff for that," he grumbled, turning his face away. "That's what we pay them for. You're supposed to be my wife now, not the help." Victoria bit her lip. 3 years ago, when Marcus first returned to the estate after his father cut him off, things had been different. He'd been charming, attentive. He'd pursued her relentlessly, the grandson of the family she'd served for 12 years, telling her she was beautiful, that she was special, that he didn't care about the class difference. He'd made her coffee in the estate's kitchen, kissed her forehead, promised her a life of respect and partnership. But now? Now every move she made seemed to irritate him. Every breath she took was too loud, every decision she made was wrong. In the kitchen, she quickly prepared the morning coffee service for Mr. Edmund Hartwell, the patriarch of the family. At 87, he still rose at 6 sharp every morning and expected his coffee and newspaper waiting in the sunroom. Victoria had been his personal housekeeper for over a decade. She knew exactly how he liked things: coffee strong and black, toast lightly buttered, marmalade on the side, newspaper folded to the business section. She moved through the massive kitchen with practiced efficiency, her hands remembering every motion even as her mind wandered. The other staff members would arrive by 6:30. She was always the first one there, always the last to leave. That's how she'd worked her way up from a junior maid to head housekeeper. That's how she'd earned Mr. Hartwell's respect and trust. The job had never been easy. 12-hour days were standard, sometimes 16 during special events. The pay was decent, about $3,800 a month plus room and board in the staff quarters, but it was steady. And in a world where nothing else felt secure, steady mattered. Marcus had been trying to find himself for the past 5 years. First, it was a tech startup that went nowhere. Then a cryptocurrency investment scheme that ate through his trust fund. Then a consulting business that never got off the ground. His grandfather had cut him off financially 2 years ago, furious at the waste, and Marcus had come crawling back to the estate with nothing but charm and empty promises. "I'm building an empire, Victoria," he'd say whenever she gently suggested he might want to find actual employment. "You don't understand how wealth works. You have to spend money to make money. Look at Elon Musk. Look at Bezos. They all took massive risks." And Victoria had believed him. More than that, she'd supported him. When he'd proposed marriage 18 months ago, she'd said yes, despite the warnings from Diane, her best friend and former colleague. Despite the raised eyebrows from the other staff. Despite the cold, assessing look in Mr. Hartwell's eyes when Marcus announced their engagement. She'd used her savings, $15,000 she'd carefully accumulated over years, to invest in Marcus's latest venture, an online luxury goods marketplace. It failed within 6 months. Every penny, gone. "It's just a temporary setback," Marcus had assured her. "The next one will hit big. You'll see." But there was never a next one that succeeded. Just more schemes, more promises, more money disappearing into thin air. Marcus brought in maybe $800 a month on average from various small hustles, barely enough to cover his car payment and entertainment expenses. Victoria's salary, which had once been hers alone, now supported them both. She took on extra work. After her regular duties ended at 7 or 8 p.m., she would do private housekeeping for wealthy families in the area, friends of the Hartwells who trusted her discretion. She cleaned, organized, managed households until midnight, sometimes later. That brought in another $2,000 to $2,500 a month, depending on how many jobs she could fit in. Every dollar went toward their bills, Marcus's investments, keeping up appearances. Because that's what Marcus cared about now, appearances. He needed the right clothes, the right car, the right watch. "Image is everything in business, Victoria," he'd say, adjusting his designer tie. "You have to look successful to be successful." The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 5:30. Victoria finished Mr. Hartwell's tray and carried it carefully to the sunroom. The old man was already there, dressed in his customary 3-piece suit despite the early hour, reading glasses perched on his nose. "Good morning, Mr. Hartwell," Victoria said warmly, setting the tray on the table beside his leather armchair. "Good morning, Victoria," he replied, and something in his voice made her look up. He was studying her with those sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "You look tired, my dear." "Just busy with preparations for the garden party, sir," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. He picked up his coffee cup, but his gaze never left her face. "How is married life treating you?" Victoria's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "Very well, thank you, sir." "Is that so?" He took a sip of coffee. "And how is my grandson contributing to the household these days?" "Marcus is, he's pursuing several opportunities, sir," Victoria said carefully. "He's very focused on building something substantial." "I see." Mr. Hartwell set down his cup with a soft click. "And in the meantime, you're working yourself to the bone, I suppose." "Running my household, taking outside jobs in the evenings, supporting a grown man who should be supporting you." Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Sir, I'm not blind, Victoria," the old man said gently. "I've watched you for 12 years. You've been the backbone of this estate. Loyal, hard-working, honest. When Marcus came back here with his tail between his legs, I knew exactly what would happen. I hoped I was wrong. Victoria stood frozen, unsure what to say. Mr. Hartwell had never spoken so directly about Marcus before. "You deserve better," he said simply, then picked up his newspaper, signaling the conversation was over. "The coffee is perfect, as always." "Thank you, my dear." Victoria left the sunroom with her heart hammering. She pushed the conversation from her mind. There was too much to do. The caterers would arrive soon, and the garden party was in 5 hours. 75 guests, seated dinner, live music, every detail had to be flawless. The day passed in a blur of organized chaos. Victoria directed the setup, managed the staff, handled 3 different crises including a broken champagne fountain and a delivery of wrong-colored linens. By the time the first guests arrived at noon, everything looked effortlessly elegant. No one would ever know the panic behind the scenes. Marcus appeared at 1 o'clock, dressed in a crisp linen suit, his hair perfectly styled. He worked the crowd like he owned the place, shaking hands, laughing, telling stories. Victoria watched from the periphery, making sure drinks were refilled, plates were cleared, every guest was attended to. "Your wife is absolutely wonderful, Mrs. Patterson," one of the guests said to Marcus as Victoria passed by with a tray of canapés. "Managing all of this with such grace." "Oh, Victoria loves this sort of thing," Marcus said dismissively, not even looking at her. "She's in her element when she's organizing." Victoria felt the words like a slap. In her element. As if she were still just the help, not his wife. Not his partner. She continued working until the last guest left at 6 p.m., then supervised the cleanup until 8:30. Her feet ached. Her back throbbed. She'd eaten nothing but a handful of canapés all day. When she finally made it back to their quarters, Marcus was on the sofa with his laptop, scrolling through something intently. Empty glasses and snack wrappers littered the coffee table. His jacket was tossed carelessly on the armchair. Victoria silently picked up the glasses and took them to the kitchenette. She wiped down the table, threw away the trash, then heated up leftover soup from the party and sat down with a bowl. Marcus walked over, poured himself sparkling water from the fridge, grabbed an apple, and went back to the sofa without a word. "Marcus," Victoria said carefully, finishing her soup. "Can we talk?" "I'm busy, Vic," he said, eyes glued to his screen. "I'm working on something important." "We haven't spent any real time together in weeks," she said softly. "Maybe we could drive into the city this weekend, have dinner somewhere nice? Just the two of us? Are you serious right now?" He finally looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "I'm on the verge of a major breakthrough. Philip knows an investor who's interested in my new platform. I need to prepare a pitch deck, update my business plan, and you're talking about dinner dates?" Victoria fell silent. A major breakthrough. She'd heard those words 100 times in the past 3 years. The breakthrough never came. Just another investor, another platform, another round of promises. She washed her bowl and went to the small desk in the corner of their bedroom. She had bookkeeping work to finish for one of her private clients, due by tomorrow morning. She turned on the lamp and lost herself in numbers. Through the wall, she could hear the television. Marcus had put on a game. Every few minutes he'd shout something, cursing at the screen or celebrating a play. This was her life now. Day after day, week after week, month after month. Work, home, work, home. She couldn't remember the last time she bought something new for herself. Her uniform dresses were wearing thin. Her good shoes needed resoling. But there was never enough money. Marcus had asked for $2,000 last month for new equipment for his latest venture. She couldn't say no. And she'd noticed how Marcus had changed toward her. The way he looked at her now, like she was a burden, an embarrassment, something holding him back from the success he deserved. "You really should start working out," he said one evening as she was changing for bed. She stood there in her simple cotton bra and worn pajama pants, suddenly painfully self-conscious. "You've let yourself go, Victoria. Look at you." Victoria froze, her nightshirt in her hands. "Marcus, I'm working 16-hour days. I don't have time for a gym." Excuses, he dismissed, scrolling through his phone. "Everyone makes time for what matters. Look at Celeste, Philip's wife. She's always immaculate. Hair, nails, figure, everything perfect. And you, well, you know." He didn't finish the sentence, but Victoria understood perfectly. She got into bed, turned toward the wall, and pressed her fists against her mouth. Tears burned her throat, but she held them back. She wouldn't cry. She was just tired. That's all. Tomorrow would be a new day. New work, new responsibilities, and tears wouldn't change anything. A week later, they were in the kitchenette. Victoria was preparing dinner, pan-searing chicken breasts and steaming vegetables. Marcus was at the small table with his tablet, reading something. "You know, Victoria, a real wife creates an environment for her husband to thrive," he said suddenly. "Take Philip's wife, Celeste. She doesn't work at all. She manages their home, handles social obligations, and Philip can focus entirely on his business. That's why he's so successful." "Celeste has staff, Marcus," Victoria replied wearily, flipping the chicken. "We don't exactly have that luxury." "See, that's exactly the problem," Marcus flared up. "You have this scarcity mindset. You're always thinking about what we don't have instead of manifesting abundance. That negative energy, it affects me. I can't focus on success when you're constantly worried about money." "Marcus, we need money to pay bills," Victoria said quietly. "That's not a mindset, that's reality. If you understood business, you'd know you have to invest in yourself first," he shot back. "But you're stuck in this employee mentality. You work for someone else, you trade time for money, and you'll never be wealthy that way." Victoria turned off the burner. The chicken was done. She plated the food silently and set it on the table. Marcus took a piece, bit into it. "It's dry," he complained. "You overcooked it." Victoria tasted her own piece. It was fine. Perfectly cooked, actually. But she said nothing. He was picking fights because he was frustrated with his own failures, and she was the easiest target. Winter melted into spring, and nothing changed. Victoria continued carrying the weight of everything on her shoulders while Marcus grew colder, more distant. Sometimes he didn't come home until morning, claiming he'd stayed at Philip's penthouse to work on business strategies late into the night. Victoria didn't ask questions. She was afraid of the answers. Afraid to learn that maybe there was someone else, someone younger, prettier, someone who hadn't spent 12 years in service. Maybe he was only staying with her out of convenience, free housing, meals prepared, laundry done. And then something happened that turned their entire world upside down. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening in May. Victoria had just returned from overseeing a dinner party at the main house. She was preparing a simple pasta in their kitchenette when Marcus burst through the door. He wasn't looking at his phone or laptop. He was on a call. "Yes, I understand," he was saying, his voice tight with barely contained emotion. "Tomorrow at 11. Yes, I'll be there. Thank you for notifying me. He ended the call and stood motionless in the entryway, staring at nothing. Then he suddenly pumped his fist in the air and let out a strange, strangled laugh. What happened? Victoria asked, setting down her wooden spoon. Marcus turned to her, and there was something unsettling in his expression. Not grief, not sadness, but hunger. Raw, greedy hunger. Grandfather's dead, he said. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. The spoon clattered to the floor. Mr. Hartwell, the man she'd served faithfully for 12 years, the man who'd treated her with more respect and kindness than anyone in her life, gone? Marcus, I'm so sorry, she began, moving toward him. When? How? Sorry? Marcus laughed, and there wasn't a shred of sorrow in the sound. Victoria, don't you understand? He left a will. The attorney just called. I'm named in it. Victoria blinked, trying to process his words. A will means inheritance, Marcus continued, his eyes gleaming with a feverish light. The estate, the properties, the investments, everything. It's mine now. Finally. Finally, I'm getting what I deserve. He started pacing their small living room, rubbing his hands together like a man who'd just won the lottery. This is it, Victoria. This is the break I've been waiting for. Don't you see? It's destiny. All those years, all those failures, they were just testing me. Preparing me for this moment. I told you everything would work out. I told you to have faith. Victoria stood frozen, watching her husband celebrate his grandfather's death. Not mourn, not grieve, but celebrate the money he thought was coming. His own flesh and blood had just died, and all he could think about was what he'd inherit. Marcus, shouldn't we arrange the funeral first, she managed. Pay our respects? Aunt Beatrice will handle all that, Marcus waved dismissively. She lived near grandfather, they were close. She can deal with the funeral arrangements. I need to focus on the legal matters. The will reading is the day after tomorrow at 11. I have to be there. He was wired all evening, unable to sit still. He called friends, announced the news. Each conversation the same, grandfather passed. Left a will. I'm about to be very, very wealthy. The pasta on the stove boiled over, the water hissing and steaming. Victoria turned off the heat and dumped everything in the trash. She had no appetite anymore. She went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in the darkness, listening to Marcus in the next room, still making excited phone calls at 1 a.m., and wondered when everything had gone so wrong. She remembered meeting him 5 years ago. He'd seemed kind back then, charming, genuine. He'd noticed her, really noticed her, not as the help but as a woman. They'd talked in the estate gardens late one evening after a party, and he'd made her laugh for the first time in years. He'd courted her properly, brought her flowers, taken her to dinner in the city. She'd fallen in love. And when he proposed, she believed they could make it work despite the class difference, despite the warnings, despite everything. But now, lying in the dark, she realized the man she'd married had either changed completely or had never really existed at all. For the next 2 days, Marcus was impossible to be around. He calculated constantly, researching property values, looking at luxury car listings, planning his new life out loud. I'm going to buy a penthouse downtown, he announced over breakfast. And a proper sports car. Maybe a Tesla, no, something with more presence. An Aston Martin. And we'll travel. Europe. Asia. I want to see Monaco, Dubai, all of it. Marcus, you don't even know what's in the will yet, Victoria tried to caution him. I know exactly what's in it, he interrupted arrogantly. I'm the only grandson. Grandfather has no other direct heirs. Aunt Beatrice is just his sister, not a blood descendant. Everything goes to me. It's basic law. He looked at her then with an expression that made her blood run cold. It was the way someone looked at an object they were deciding whether to keep or discard. You know, Victoria, he said slowly, when this money comes through, I'm going to need a wife who matches my new status. Someone polished. Someone impressive. Look at yourself. You dress like you shop at discount stores. Your hair's a mess. No proper jewelry. I'd be embarrassed to bring you to the kind of events I'll be attending. Victoria felt like she'd been slapped. Her hands trembled. She set down her coffee cup, afraid she'd drop it. I dress this way because we don't have money for expensive clothes, she said, her voice barely steady. Every dollar I make goes towards supporting us, Marcus. Towards supporting your dreams. There you go with the guilt trips again, Marcus grimaced. It's not my fault you don't know how to manage finances properly. Successful women figure out how to look good and run a household efficiently. Maybe you should learn from them. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but the words died in her throat. Marcus had already stood up and walked out, leaving his dishes on the table for her to clean. She sat alone in the silence, staring at the cold remnants of breakfast. Something inside her, something that had been cracking for months, finally broke completely. She walked to the mirror in their bedroom and looked at herself for a long time. He was right, in a way. She didn't look good. Her uniform dress was faded and pilled. Her hair desperately needed attention. Her face was drawn and tired, dark shadows under her eyes, lines of stress around her mouth. But whose fault was that? She'd been working herself to exhaustion to support him. She'd given him everything, her savings, her time, her energy, her heart. She'd denied herself every comfort so he could chase his fantasies of wealth. And this was her reward. Being told she wasn't good enough. Being told she was an embarrassment. Victoria slowly walked back to the kitchenette. She sat at the table, her hands still trembling, and poured herself a glass of water. She needed to calm down. Maybe this was just the stress before the inheritance. Maybe once things settled, once Marcus got whatever he was getting, he'd go back to being the man she fell in love with. But deep in her heart, in the part of herself she'd been trying so hard to ignore, she knew the truth. That man was gone. Maybe he'd never existed at all. The morning of the will reading, Marcus was up before Victoria for the first time in months. She woke at 5 as usual, but found him already in the bathroom, meticulously grooming himself, examining his reflection with critical focus. "Does this tie work?" he asked when she appeared in the doorway. He was wearing his best suit, charcoal gray, the one they'd splurged on 2 years ago for a wedding. "Or is it too much? I don't want to look like I'm trying too hard, but I need to look like someone who deserves wealth." Victoria studied him. The tie was fine, a subtle navy blue with thin silver stripes. "It's perfect," she said quietly. "Of course it is," Marcus muttered, turning back to the mirror. "Today changes everything, Victoria. Today I find out exactly how rich I am." He didn't eat breakfast, just gulped down coffee while pacing nervously. He checked his phone constantly, looked at his watch, checked his phone again. "What time do you need to leave?" Victoria asked, sipping her tea. "The appointment is at 11, but I'm leaving early," he said. Traffic into the city can be unpredictable. I'll probably head out by 9:30. Do you want me to come with you? Victoria offered carefully. For support? Marcus whirled around, staring at her like she'd suggested something absurd. Why would you come? He snapped. This is Hartwell family business. You're not, this doesn't concern you. Victoria felt the words like a physical blow. Not family. Even though they'd been married for 18 months. Even though she'd lived on the Hartwell estate for 12 years. She was still just the help in his eyes. Okay, was all she managed to say. Aunt Beatrice will be there with all her moralizing, Marcus continued, adjusting his cufflinks. She always knows how to kill the mood. I don't need extra complications. He grabbed his jacket, checked his reflection one last time, and headed for the door. I'll be back when I'm back. Might be late, lots of paperwork to go through with the attorneys. And he was gone. No goodbye, no kiss, just the door slamming behind him. Victoria finished her cold tea, washed the cup, and got ready for work. Mr. Hartwell's funeral had been 3 days ago, a somber, elegant affair. She'd wept quietly in the back row, mourning the kind old man who'd treated her with dignity. Marcus had stood in the front, dry-eyed, checking his phone throughout the service. Now the estate felt empty without its patriarch. The staff moved through their duties quietly, everyone feeling the loss. Victoria threw herself into work, trying not to think about what was happening downtown, about what Marcus might be learning, about how their lives were about to change. At lunch, she tried calling him. No answer. She sent a text, "How did it go?" The message showed as read immediately, but no reply came. The afternoon dragged endlessly. Victoria supervised the weekly deep cleaning of the main house, managed a delivery of fresh flowers for the foyer, handled payroll for the household staff. But her mind was elsewhere, wondering, worrying. She finished work at 6:30 and returned to their quarters. Empty. Silent. She heated up leftover chicken, ate mechanically, then sat at her desk to work on her private bookkeeping clients. But she couldn't focus. She kept listening for footsteps in the hallway, for the sound of the door opening. Marcus didn't return until nearly 10 o'clock. Victoria heard his key in the lock, heard him enter. She stood up from the desk and went to meet him in the living room. Well, she asked, searching his face. What happened? Marcus stood in the doorway, and slowly, a smile spread across his face. Not a warm smile. Something predatory, triumphant. It's even better than I imagined, he said, pulling off his jacket and tossing it carelessly onto the sofa. So much better. What did you find out? Victoria took a step closer, her heart beating faster. Marcus walked to the window, looking out at the darkened estate grounds. Then he turned to face her, and his eyes were gleaming. The estate itself, this whole property, 15 acres of prime real estate, he began, ticking items off on his fingers. The penthouse in downtown Chicago, 3 bedrooms, lake views. The vacation home in Door County. Investment accounts, stock portfolio, bonds. The attorney said altogether, we're looking at somewhere between $4 and $5 million, maybe more once everything's properly assessed. Victoria's legs felt weak. She sank onto the arm of the sofa. $4 to $5 million. It was an incomprehensible amount of money. The kind of wealth she'd spent 12 years serving but never dreamed of possessing. My God, she breathed. Marcus, that's incredible. That's mine, Marcus corrected, his voice hard. Finally. No more scraping by. No more listening to people tell me I'm not living up to my potential. I'm rich now, Victoria. Genuinely wealthy. Everything changes. He was saying I, not we. Victoria noticed, but tried to push the observation away. When can you finalize everything? She asked. Attorney Sterling said about 2 weeks, Marcus replied. Some paperwork to process, property assessments to complete, but it's all formality. The money is mine. He turned back to the window, his reflection ghostly in the dark glass. I've been thinking all day, he said slowly. About what this means. About what I want my life to look like now. Something in his tone made Victoria's skin prickle with unease. I'm going out, Marcus announced suddenly, grabbing his jacket again. Philip's expecting me. We're going to celebrate properly. Don't wait up. Marcus, wait. But he was already gone, the door slamming behind him for the second time that day. Victoria stood alone in the empty room, and a cold, creeping dread began to settle in her chest. For the next 3 days, Marcus barely came home. He'd arrive late, sometimes not until dawn, smelling of expensive cologne and whiskey. He'd sleep until noon, then disappear again. They exchanged maybe a dozen words total. Victoria continued working, continued managing the estate, continued taking her evening jobs. But the silence from Marcus was deafening. Something was coming. She could feel it. On Sunday morning, Victoria was in their kitchenette, drinking coffee and reading news on her phone. Marcus had been locked in the bedroom since he'd stumbled in at 4 a.m. She'd heard him on the phone multiple times, his voice low and intense. Suddenly, the bedroom door opened. Marcus emerged, dressed in fresh clothes, his face set with determination. Victoria, we need to talk, he said, and the cold finality in his voice made her blood freeze. About what? She set down her phone slowly. Marcus walked to the kitchenette, poured himself a glass of water, drank it in one long gulp. Then he turned to face her. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days, he began. About my life, about my future, about what I want. And I've come to a realization. What realization? Victoria stood up from the table, her heart hammering. We're not working, you and me, Marcus said bluntly. We've been stuck in this pattern for years, and I don't want to live like this anymore. I need to move forward, start fresh, and you're holding me back. Marcus, what are you saying? Her voice came out as barely a whisper. I want a divorce, he stated flatly. It's time we both faced reality. We're not right for each other. We never were. The words hung in the air between them. Victoria felt like the floor had dropped out from under her feet. Are you serious? She managed. Right now? You're asking for a divorce now, right after you inherited millions? The timing is irrelevant, Marcus said coldly. This has been building for a long time. I'm just finally honest enough to acknowledge it. We've been married for 18 months, Victoria said, her voice shaking. Together for 5 years. I supported you through everything. I gave you my savings. I worked 2 jobs so you could pursue your dreams. And I appreciate that, Marcus interrupted, his tone dismissive. I really do. But appreciation isn't love. And let's be honest, Victoria, the love died a long time ago. We settled into routine. That doesn't mean we have to stay trapped in it forever. Trapped? The word came out sharp, angry. Is that what I am to you? A trap? I'm being honest, Marcus said. People change. I've changed. I need something different now. Someone different. I'm about to enter a whole new world, Victoria. Country clubs, galas, business dinners with influential people. And I need a wife who fits that world. And I don't fit, Victoria said quietly, understanding flooding through her. No, Marcus agreed without hesitation. You don't. You never will. You're a housekeeper, Victoria. That's who you are. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not the life I want anymore. Victoria felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You waited, she said, her voice hollow. You waited until you knew you'd inherited the money. That's why you've been distant. You were planning this. Marcus didn't deny it. His silence was confirmation enough. I packed your things, he said, gesturing toward the entryway. 2 suitcases and a bag. Your clothes, personal items, everything. You can collect the rest later if you need to. Victoria walked slowly to the entryway. Sure enough, her luggage sat there, neatly packed. He'd gone through her belongings, folded her life into bags, prepared to put her out. All while she'd been working yesterday, he'd been erasing her from his life. I had the divorce papers drawn up, Marcus continued, following her. He picked up a folder from the side table and held it out. It's straightforward. No property claims, clean break. You just need to sign. I'll file them immediately. In 60 days, it'll be finalized. Victoria took the papers with numb hands. Her eyes scanned the pages, but she couldn't focus on the words. The letters blurred together. I don't need you anymore, Victoria, Marcus said, and now there was something cruel in his voice, something that wanted to wound. Do you understand? I'm rich now. I'm going to have the life I always deserved. Beautiful, successful, prestigious. And you can go back to what you were before. A maid. That's where you belong. He actually laughed, a cold, mocking sound. Did you really think I was going to take you with me? Really? You thought I'd want to parade you around at charity balls and yacht clubs? Look at yourself. You're nobody, Victoria. You'll always be nobody. Each word was a knife. Victoria stood there, the divorce papers clutched in her shaking hands, and listened as the man she'd loved destroyed her. And those sacrifices you keep mentioning, Marcus continued, making air quotes with his fingers, that was your choice. Nobody forced you to work 2 jobs. You decided to play the martyr. So don't come at me now expecting gratitude or guilt. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. And suddenly, something shifted inside her. The pain was still there, sharp and overwhelming, but something else rose up to meet it. Dignity. Cold, hard dignity. Where do I sign? She asked, her voice steady and calm. Marcus blinked, clearly surprised. He'd expected tears, begging, maybe hysterics. But Victoria just stood there, back straight, meeting his gaze with level eyes. Right here, he pointed to a line at the bottom of the first page. And here on the second page. Victoria took the pen he offered. With a hand that didn't shake, she signed her name. Once. Twice. 5 years of her life, crossed out with 2 strokes of a pen. Perfect, Marcus said, taking the documents back and tucking them into the folder. Quick and drama-free. I always knew you were a smart woman, Victoria. He walked to the door and opened it wide, holding it like a doorman. Well, I wish you luck, he said with a smirk. Or as they say, I hope you find someone willing to take care of you. Though at your age, that might be difficult. Victoria picked up one suitcase, then the duffel bag. They were heavy, but she didn't wince. She stepped over the threshold into the hallway, then came back for the second suitcase. Marcus stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching her with that satisfied, cruel smile. "You know what, Victoria," he said as she grabbed the last bag. "I almost pity you. You're not a bad person. You're just not my level. Not anymore. I'm playing in a different league now. You understand?" Victoria stopped. She turned her head and looked at him one last time. Looked at this man she'd loved, this man she'd sacrificed everything for. And realized there was nothing left. No love, no hate. Just emptiness. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said quietly, firmly. And she walked away without looking back. Behind her, she heard his laughter. That nasty, gloating laugh echoing in the hallway. He was laughing at her, celebrating his victory. Victoria walked down the corridor of the staff wing, carrying her heavy bags, her head held high despite everything. She made it to the service entrance, stepped out into the late morning sunshine. The estate grounds stretched before her, the gardens she'd overseen for 12 years, the paths she'd walked thousands of times. It was a beautiful May day. Birds sang. Flowers bloomed. The world continued turning, indifferent to her pain. She pulled out her phone and called Diane, her best friend, her former colleague who'd left the Hartwell estate 2 years ago to start her own cleaning business. "Diane, it's me," Victoria said when her friend answered. Her voice cracked slightly on the words, but she forced herself to continue. "Can I come over? I need a place to stay. I left Marcus." "Oh honey, of course," Diane's worried voice came through immediately. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'll tell you everything when I get there," Victoria managed. "I just need to get away from here. Come straight over. I'm home. I'll put the kettle on." Victoria called a car service, something she rarely did because of the expense, but she couldn't face public transportation with all her luggage and her barely held composure. When the car arrived, she loaded her bags and climbed into the back seat. As the car pulled away from the estate, Victoria looked back one last time at the grand house, the manicured lawns, the life she was leaving behind. And only then, in the privacy of the car's back seat, did she allow the first tears to fall. They came silently, streaming down her face as the familiar landscape blurred past the windows. 12 years of her life at that estate. 5 years with Marcus. All of it, gone. Dismissed. Thrown away like she meant nothing. Diane lived in a modest townhouse in a quiet neighborhood 40 minutes away. She was waiting at the door when Victoria arrived, and she pulled her friend into a fierce hug the moment she saw her tear-stained face. "Come inside, come on," Diane murmured, helping with the bags. "You're safe now. You're okay." Inside, Diane settled Victoria on the sofa with hot tea and didn't press for details. She just sat beside her, holding her hand, letting her friend gather herself. Finally, Victoria told her everything. About the inheritance, about Marcus's coldness these past few days, about how he'd kicked her out that morning with packed bags and divorce papers. She spoke quietly, without hysterics, because the shock had numbed her. "That absolute bastard," Diane hissed when Victoria finished. "I never liked him, Vic. Never. He always treated you like the help, even after you married him. Like you should be grateful he noticed you." "I loved him," Victoria said hollowly. "I really did. I know, honey. I know." The first few days at Diane's place passed in a fog. Victoria went through the motions: sleep, eat, stare at walls. She called in sick to work for the first time in 12 years. She couldn't face going back to the estate, couldn't face seeing Marcus, couldn't face the pitying looks from the other staff members. Diane gave her space but was always there, bringing meals, sitting with her in comfortable silence, letting her process the grief and shock. Victoria's phone stayed silent. Marcus didn't call, didn't text. It was as if their 5 years together had never existed. As if she'd been erased from his life completely. On the 4th day, Victoria forced herself to get up, shower properly, and start thinking about her future. She couldn't hide at Diane's forever. She needed a plan. That afternoon, an unknown number called her phone. Victoria Hayes, a male voice asked when she answered. Yes, this is she. This is Sterling and Associates law firm. My name is Attorney Thaddeus Sterling. I'm handling the estate of the late Edmund Hartwell. I need to meet with you urgently regarding the inheritance matter. Victoria was confused. I'm sorry, but I'm not a family member. That's my husband's grandfather. We're getting divorced. Yes, I'm aware, the attorney said, and there was something urgent in his tone. That's precisely why I need to see you immediately. This is time-sensitive. Can you come to my office today? Say, 4 o'clock? Victoria looked at the clock. It was 1:30. I can be there at 4, she said slowly. But I don't understand why. I'll explain everything when you arrive, Attorney Sterling interrupted. It's very important, Ms. Hayes. Please don't delay. He gave her the address, a high-rise office building in downtown Chicago. Victoria wrote it down, her hand shaking slightly. After hanging up, she sat staring at her phone. Why would the estate attorney need to see her? What could she possibly have to do with Edmund Hartwell's inheritance? She'd barely known the man personally, had only served him. What was that about? Diane asked, bringing fresh coffee. The estate attorney wants to see me, Victoria said. About the inheritance. I don't understand why. Are you going? I have to. He said it was urgent. At 3:15, Victoria dressed carefully in one of her better outfits, a simple navy dress and low heels. She took the train downtown, her stomach churning with anxiety. The law office was elegant and intimidating, all dark wood and leather furniture. The receptionist directed her to a conference room on the 15th floor. Victoria pushed open the door and froze. At the large conference table sat Attorney Sterling, a distinguished man in his 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes. In a chair by the window sat an elderly woman in a black dress and pearls, Aunt Beatrice, whom Victoria recognized from the funeral. And standing against the wall, looking pale and tense, was Marcus. His eyes widened when Victoria entered. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Ms. Hayes, thank you for coming, Attorney Sterling said, standing and gesturing to a chair. Please, have a seat. Victoria sat, placing her purse carefully in her lap. Her heart was pounding. What was happening? I've called this meeting because a complication has arisen regarding Mr. Hartwell's estate, the attorney began, opening a leather folder. I disclosed the basic terms of the will to Mr. Marcus Hartwell several days ago, but there was a condition I mentioned only briefly. Now that certain events have transpired, it's necessary to read the full terms in the presence of all relevant parties. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. Victoria could see it from the corner of her eye. Attorney Sterling put on his reading glasses. I will now read the complete inheritance clause as written by Edmund Hartwell. He cleared his throat and began. All my property, including the Hartwell family estate, the penthouse residence at Lake Shore Drive, the vacation property in Door County, all financial accounts, stocks, bonds, and investment portfolios, I bequeath to my grandson, Marcus Edmund Hartwell. Marcus straightened slightly, a flicker of relief crossing his face. However, the attorney continued, he may receive this inheritance only upon fulfillment of the following condition. At the time of claiming the inheritance, Marcus Hartwell must be in a legal marriage with his current wife, Victoria Hayes Hartwell, continuously for a period of no less than 1 year from the date of my death. Victoria's breath caught. She glanced at Marcus, whose face had gone white. Furthermore, Attorney Sterling read on, in the event that the marriage is dissolved before the expiration of said term, or if at the time of my death Marcus Hartwell is not married to Victoria Hayes, all the aforementioned property shall transfer in its entirety to Victoria Hayes as a person who has demonstrated true character, dignity, and loyalty. The attorney looked up from the document. The will was executed 2 years ago, properly notarized and witnessed. It is legally binding. Silence filled the room. Victoria couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she'd just heard. That's impossible, Marcus finally choked out, stepping toward the table. Grandfather couldn't have, why would he do that? Because Edmund saw exactly who you were, Aunt Beatrice said quietly, rising from her chair. Her voice was sad but firm. He saw how you treated Victoria. How you used her, took advantage of her kindness, her work ethic, her love. 2 years ago, Edmund visited you in Chicago, the elderly woman continued. He stayed at the estate for a week. Do you remember? Marcus said nothing, but his jaw tightened. He watched you, Aunt Beatrice said. He saw Victoria working herself to exhaustion while you played at being an entrepreneur. He saw how you spoke to her, how dismissive you were, how you treated her like a servant even though she was your wife. And he saw that she was a good woman who deserved better. He came to me immediately after that visit, Attorney Sterling added. He said he wanted to protect someone decent. His words were, if Marcus stays married to Victoria for at least a year after my death, it will prove he values her. Then he can have the inheritance. But if he divorces her, it will prove he only wanted the money. And in that case, Victoria deserves every penny as compensation for what she endured. Marcus collapsed into a chair, his face ashen. When did I file for divorce? He whispered. Attorney Sterling consulted his notes. The divorce petition was filed on May 18, the fast-tracked processing. It was finalized on May 20 at 2:47 p.m. Mr. Hartwell died on April 15, the attorney continued. That's 35 days ago. The will required the marriage to continue for 1 full year, 365 days. You divorced your wife after only 35 days. He closed the folder with a definitive snap. Therefore, according to the explicit terms of the will, all property and assets transfer to Victoria Hayes.